Hey everybody, welcome back to Improv Town. As always, I am your host, Clayton Mashad, and holy crap, do I have a fantastic episode for you today. I was fortunate enough recently to interview Dave Razowsky. If you don't know who Dave Razowsky is, then why are you listening to my podcast? If you don't know who he is, Dave Razowsky is former artistic director of Second City Hollywood. He studied with Del Close back in the 80s. He is the fantastic host of the ADD Comedy Podcast, which I highly recommend. Check out the Susan Messing episode. Check out the McNapier episode. Check out the Ali Farinackian episode. Check out the Brad O'Connell episode. Check out Pack Improv podcast where Miles Stroth interviews him. Just check out the Pack Improv podcast in general because it's fantastic. Check out the Improv Nerd episode where Jimmy Crane interviews him. He is fantastic. He is an improv guru. Everything he says is brilliant. And in this episode, we not only talk about his background, him studying with Del, him performing with Stephen Carell and Stephen Colbert and Rachel Dratch and all of those fantastic people, but we also get to talk about why he disagrees with every improv rule that we tend to follow. So we talk about why he hates yes and, why he thinks taking suggestions at the beginning of a set is stupid, why he hates exposition, and lots of other things that he disagrees with everything that we learn, and convincingly so. He is a fantastic improv teacher. I fucking love this conversation. We did this when I got to take a workshop with him in Boston. It was fantastic. I am pretty sure I'm going to post the notes from that workshop attached somehow to this episode. I'll post a link to Viewpoints, which is an idea that he loves using in improv that a lot of people don't talk about. I'll post some notes to that, and you're going to love it. As always, if you love this podcast, or if you at least tolerate it, rate and review us on wherever you listen to podcasts, and enjoy.
My big phrase is this. It's the phrase, I can do that. You know what I mean? Where you go, right, yeah. Well, here's a challenge to me. I think I can do that. I think I can do that. I can do that. And then I found myself saying it without really even thinking about it, where I'll just look at something like rewiring a lamp. I don't know, just look at a lamp and think, I guess I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah, it's a very freeing way to look at things.
Absolutely. Because the only difference between thinking that you could do it and not thinking that you could do it is thinking you could do it or not thinking you could do it.
Right.
And you're right on both counts. If you don't think you can do it, then you're not going to do it. If you think you can do it, then you can do it. So that's where I am with that. Have we started?
Yeah.
I love it. That's great. Great. Do whatever you want. Yeah.
I just kind of started because it was like I wanted to do an improv podcast for a while. Originally, doing improv. And then I was like, well, that's just going to be really hard to, coordinate with, multiple people and stuff.
Right.
I was like, well, I know people who I think are really good at improv. Maybe I'll just talk to them about whatever specific thing I think they're good at.
Oh, I love that. That's great. And then what ends up happening is you always steer off into some other place. You always go somewhere else. Because nobody wants to talk about improv for 45 minutes. I mean, maybe people do. I don't know. But it gets so inside baseball where you start talking about things that, I don't know, people would be interested in hearing. But I guess if you and I are having an interesting conversation, it's going to be interesting. If you want to be interesting, be interested. So that's how that works.
Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't mind listening to people talk about improv for hours.
Right, exactly. There's a woman that has hired me to work with her in a class in Florida, and she's quite great. And we've been going back and forth about what the weekend's going to look like. And she wants me to teach 9 hours in a row. And I'm thinking, I can't do that. I mean, I can do that. I'm sure I know I can do that. I can do that, but I don't know that I'd want to anymore.
Right.
After 6 hours.
Yeah, 6 is kind of the...
That's what I do. I do 6 hours. I do 3 hours. I'll take a break and do the 3 hours. And I could do that because I will work with you over and over and over again. But, after 7 hours or 8 hours, I'm like, because it is exhausting. It's exhausting. It's tiring. And I want to say it's exhausting as digging a ditch. You know, it really is. Like at the end of an 8-hour session, I have nothing left other than knowing how to order a vodka on the rocks at the bar. You know, and that's all that I really have to do. Or, you know, sit at a restaurant and eat. And then I'm done. And that's one of the reasons that when somebody hires me to come in, I don't want to stay at your apartment or your house. Because when I'm done, I don't want to talk about improv anymore. Don't want to talk about it anymore.
Good thing I got you before you taught rather than after.
Well, I would sit and talk to you about it afterwards, because that's going to be a different experience, because we're going to have the source material of the class in order to talk. But if we're going to come out straight right ahead and talk, you know, but 8 hours of teaching improv is just way too long. It's just way too long.
Yeah, because you have to watch it. I feel like it's the same thing. Like, watching 8 hours of improv would be hard enough, even if you weren't responsible for.
Yeah, and as an improv teacher, and the way that I teach is, when you and your partner are on stage, when you and your partner are on stage, it's not just the two of you, it's the three of you. It's actually four of us. I'm watching what you're doing. I'm watching what she's doing. I'm watching what I'm doing. I'm watching what, it's multi-level, because you are you, I am you, she is she, I am she. Does that make sense? The choices that you're making, I'm following those choices, and I'm me as an audience member watching this thing as well. So I'm looking at it, and as a teacher, and as a director, and as an auteur, the auteur being what is my particular improv style, because when you're working with me, I'm not going to do your dumb improv style. I'm going to do my dumb improv style. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
You know, if you're looking for yes and, I'm not your guy. I'm clearly not your guy, because I don't give a fuck about yes and. My focus is, what's your point of view, holding on to your point of view, holding on to your point of view until you emotionally change, and then grabbing another point of view. And to say that I don't like yes and, it's not true. But what's true is, I don't like the coming in and saying, I have to say yes and to everything. Well, you don't have to say yes and to everything. And that's the way that I work. So I'm not going to do your dumb reindeer games. I'm going to do my own dumb reindeer games.
Right. I think this is the language that I've heard you use, but being in service to the other person. So, you know, yes and is like the beginner way of doing that, but that's all. The yes and is to that end. It is not the only.
No.
It's not the only way to be in service to your partner.
And when we say service to your partner, I think it's important. I mean, for me, I feel like me being in service to my partner. Who is my partner? I mean, is my partner the character that I'm in relationship with, or is my partner the actor that is behind the character of who I'm playing with? Yeah, and I think that's what, for me, it's that latter part.
Yeah, I think that's a distinction that we don't really address a lot.
Clearly, and that's why people don't understand it, because like, oh, you got to say yes to everything. It's like, the fuck you got to say yes to everything. But that's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, it is not explained well, because, and you've probably heard me say this before, it's so many improv teachers are teaching an echo. They're teaching what they've been told they have to teach. And the students aren't really getting it, because they're not understanding it on the level that those practicing it are practicing it. Because all the improvisers that I know, and I know so many, and as you do too, they're not saying yes and to everything. That's just boring, and it's children's theater, and who the fuck wants to watch that? I'm participating in this to grab onto a point of view, to really milk the shit out of it, to pull this stuff out of you, what you may or may not want to say. And it's not to say that everything has to be, you know, all angry, or it's also, everything doesn't have to be happy puppy loves kitty town. But if you say, I'm hungry in a scene, I'm going to go off of that. And if I say, then eat something, I want you to say, nah, I'm hungry. Like, yeah, he said no. Yes, let's go. Because you said, okay.
Right, that problem solved.
But exactly, we've solved the problem. Be the problem. Be the problem. And I will watch you be the problem. And I will feed you being the problem enhancer, so that you can still keep being the problem. Because I want you to be the problem. The moment your problem is solved, it's like, oh, okay. And yes and doesn't mean to say yes to everything.
Yeah, most of the time saying yes to the player, which half the time the player wants you to say no to the character.
Absolutely. But the moment that, yes, right. And the moment that an improv teacher or, somebody that I don't want to work with would say, we're going to stop the scene there. He said no. Or we're going to stop the scene there. What did he do wrong, class? He said no. You can't say no. It's like, no. No. I'm gone. I'm out of here. I'm done. I'm done. Because I just don't want to do that.
Yeah, I feel like we already got to super inside baseball.
Yeah, yeah. But, we know who our audience is.
Yeah, so normally I start, the first half is normally kind of just like an unstructured kind of bio where I have people talk about themselves, but I feel like for the sake of time, since we don't have that much time and you have a very storied, improv career.
Whatever you want to do, that's fine.
Yeah, and I feel like, a lot of that stuff is, they can go listen to your podcast if they want to. So I just figured I'd just ask some questions about, your career that I think are particularly interesting for a little bit, and then we can talk about your teaching style and improv theories. So if I'm not wrong, you started first you were an actor, right? And then you started your improv career doing dramatic improv in prisons?
Right. Well, I was thinking about this the other day, my origin story. I was thinking about this the other day. My family moved, maybe 3 or 4 times before we came to this one particular house in Chicago. And my mom hooked me into this class called drama. I remember saying, what's drama? And it was this woman, Esther Weikel, and she was essentially a kid's class of improv games. But you didn't call it that back then. You just didn't call it that in 67, 68. Nobody knew what that was, really. And so we were doing improv games. So at that time, I really wrapped my head around that. And then this woman Esther cast me in shows as the kid in the adult show, and I started doing it that way. And then I went to college. My dad was like, you can't get a degree in theater, even though I'd been doing theater. By the time I got to college, I was doing theater for 10 years. Get a degree, then I got a degree in photojournalism. And when I left, everything was booming theatrically in Chicago and improvisationally in Chicago. Right. Mayor Daley, Richard J. Daley had died. The constraints on what you were allowed to do in storefront theaters, or what you were allowed to do in storefronts, what you couldn't do in storefronts, that was let go, that was surrendered. And now all these theaters were coming into Chicago and doing storefront theater and storefront improvisation. And I just happened to be coming in at that time, having done one show in college. And I hooked up with Improv Olympic, now known as IO, with Del Close, and that really, before that was, when I graduated, I was doing, I auditioned for a theater company called Geese Theater Company that performed in prisons across the United States. Did non-comedic, therapeutic, quotation marks, educational, rehabilitational, mask work improvisation in prisons across the United States. So that was intense. And that was dramatic.
That sounds intense.
It was intense. And then when you're 25 years old, and this is true of anything, you feel like I can do anything. And at that moment, I didn't really know improvisation, according to what they wanted, and they wanted it to be brought down. They wanted it to be grounded, and they wanted it to be real, and they wanted to deal with the issues that the incarcerated were dealing with at that time. So we lived on a 53-foot school bus. We traveled around the country. I think we put 20,000 miles on this 1963 3-speed International Harvester school bus, converted into, like a garage that you slept in. And, we did that across the United States. So it wasn't really comedic it wasn't comedic really at that time at all. It was a lot of movement. It was a lot of things that I felt at that moment were different than when anybody else was doing a career that was anybody else's career in theater, because nobody saw us. The only people that saw us were people that were in prisons and the people that worked there. So if you were there to do it for any other reason other than the expression of doing that, then you're in the wrong place. If you're thinking, I'm going to get famous by doing improvisation in prison, that's not going to work. That's just not going to work. So at that time, it really, and I haven't really thought about this, but at that time, it made me a different sort of improviser. It made me look at the world in a very different way, look at improvisation in a very different way, look at theater in a different way, look at people in a different way, look at the underclass in a different way, which really fed quite nicely into a few years later when I went to Second City, started taking classes there, because that you needed to have you needed to have information about it in order to create satire and parody, and you had to have all that information and be connected to the people that were essentially your audience. So it was sort of a commedia dell'arte sort of thing, where it was a combination of commedia dell'arte where you play stock characters and you plot regional ideas and things like that. So it was a combination of that, but it was also freeing because you weren't playing those stock characters. But you still have to know who's the mayor of that town. And when you're touring with the Second City, one of the things that you really want to do is, in Akron, what restaurant just closed? In Akron, who's zooming who? And just to pop those things in, they go, oh my God, they wrote this skit for us. Where it's like, no, we're just kind of Mad Libs.
That's so interesting. I never thought about that aspect.
Which aspect?
Of touring.
Yeah.
Of knowing local stuff in order to put it in the show.
Yeah, well, that's a major part of satire, is really getting to know what it is that was going on. It's also a major part of Geeks Company, the theater in prisons, where you really had to get to know the people. You had to get to know these people's lives and what that was like, because 25-year-old Jewish guy, middle class, Chicago, very, every once in a while getting in trouble with the law, but not prison law, it required homework. It required you to do homework. And the homework that you did, you have to look at it in a way where you say, this isn't something that I have to do. This is something that I get to do. Because when you look at something and say, well, this is something that I have to do, there's an obligation that you feel. When you say this is something that I get to do, then you go, oh, this is part of my life. And it's just, it's surrounding me. And I have to hold on to that, so that when I do go to one of these places, I have something in my pocket, to throw out there.
Right, yeah. I think that's super important with art in general, but improv, that you never want to have that feeling of like, oh, I have to go to practice tonight.
Oh my gosh. When you start looking at things like that, I'm always very careful when I'm teaching or performing. I don't even have to think about it, but I do, when this phrase pops up, I go, uh-oh, I just had a change, where I say, oh, I gotta go to work. And if I say I gotta go to work, at that moment that came out, kinesthetically came out, I say to myself, I just called it work. Is it work? Has it turned into work? Because if it's turned into work, do I want to work? Because this wasn't work when I first started it. And if I want this to be work, then I have to look at it in that way. And that's not a big thing, because I don't really like to work. I like to get paid. I like to do what it is that I get paid to do. But I haven't worked in years. I haven't worked in years. I don't go to work. I don't work. I play. I work, I play, I live, I unfold, I unfurl, I evolve. I go through my life playing, and I guess I do work, and my job is being Dave Razowsky, and that's my job. We all have our job, and our job title is our name, and that's my job. My job is to do that. My job is to be Dave Razowsky. And what does that mean? That means just whatever it is, new products that I have on the market, which is like thoughts that I have, or ideas that I have, or concepts that I have, or exercises that I have, we're unveiling a concept, and it's always beta. Nothing's ever, it's not like, oh, we're releasing this. Because once you release it, I think that's when work comes in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the process over product.
Yes, exactly.
Idea.
Yeah, right. The product is the process.
Right.
Yeah.
So I asked you a question, and then you start talking, you mentioned Dell, and
right.
then jumped back to the other question, and then we jump forward. And I just feel like the listening audience is going to be mad. They're like, he was about to start talking about taking classes with Dell, and then...
Oh, I see. Oh, no, we could always go back to Dell. Yeah.
Just change the subject.
Yeah. Well, Dell, welcome to my world. Yeah, so you want me to talk more about Dell?
Yeah, just mean you finish the thought.
I can't remember what the thought was. What was the thought?
So first you did the prison
right.
improv.
Oh, right, I did the prison improv.
And then we started talking about Second City, but you did I.O. first?
Oh, well, yeah, I did I.O. I did Improv Olympic before that. Thank you for pointing that out, because I am stream of conscious. Stream of unconscious would be more like it. That's got to be a phrase. Stream of unconsciousness. That's a good phrase. So my fifth year, I did 5 years of college. I got a degree in photojournalism, which I really love. I did 5 years of college, and my fifth year I thought, I want to get back into theater. And I auditioned for a show, and it was called The Firebugs by Max Frisch. And I really loved it. It was really, really cool. And I thought, I why was I not doing this? And then I got back into theater, and then I left, and I graduated, and I applied for a bunch of jobs as a photojournalist, and I didn't get any, thank God. And I got a job as selling cameras at a camera store on the northwest side of Chicago, northwest side. And I got that job, and then I heard about this guy, Del Close, or Improv Olympic. I have no idea. That's a missing part of my brain. Like, how did I know about that? Because at that time, there was Second City, there was Dudley Riggs in Minnesota, there was Second City, Dudley Riggs, maybe Keith Johnstone.
Maybe Loose Moose.
Loose Moose up in Canada. Certainly those three. And there was, there was Players Workshop, which is a cousin of Second City. So maybe there are four places that taught improvisation. 4 places. Like college didn't teach it. 4 places. So in my mind, I'm thinking, how did I know about that? So I went over to IO, or Improv Olympic, in Chicago. And I went over there and I talked to this woman named Sharna Halperin, and I said, I just left a theater company that performed prisons across the United States. She goes, you could skip my class, go right to Del. I'm like, who's Del? And at that time, it was it was an amazing time because he was sober, and it wasn't all that popular. And I was the second house team. And when I say the second house team, I don't mean at that theater.
You mean ever?
I mean ever. So,
what was the name of that team?
It was called Grime and Punishment. Grime and Punishment, and on that team.
What was the first team ever?
That was Barons Barracudas. So that was Dave Pasquesi and, Dave Pasquesi, Mark Beltzman. It was just like all these great people. Honor Finnegan, Bill Russell. It was just an amazing group of people. And John Judd. And what would happen is, because Del, that was the first house team. That was the team that Del loved those guys, and I loved watching those guys. And I remember sitting there, and anybody who's ever really fell in love with improvisation not because it was a conceptual thing, but fell in love with improvisation because they witnessed something quite wonderful. They witnessed someone doing something quite wonderful. And when they witnessed somebody doing something quite wonderful, they're like, I know for me, I thought, I could do that. I think I could do that. That scares the shit out of me, but I can do that. And when you witness something or somebody doing that, that's called inspiration. And when you're inspired and you have an opportunity to do that, that's what I did. So I looked at Barons Barracudas and I felt like there's just no way, and this is another thing that people go through, there's just no way that they're making that up.
Right.
There's just no way that this is extemporaneous. There's just no way that this is ad-libbed. This has to be written. And then you realize, no, it's not. It's not. And so really my first class in improvisation was with Del, and it was just really interesting because I'm reading this book called Improv Nation by Sam Wasson. And in it he just described this one. I just got up and grabbed the book. That's why the sounds were. So, in this one section that I just read, it's about Del working with the committee this is really inside baseball, Del working with the committee in San Francisco, and it described the rehearsals. And the rehearsals were this, and this was exactly what the classes were with Del in 83, 84. It was, Del had something on his mind, Del had a concept, Del saw something, Del liked to color, Del had food that reminded him of something, and he would just get up, and for 45 minutes of a 3-hour class, he would just ramble, and then not ramble, but he would just lecture us, and you'd go, what? And the what are things like, he'd talk about Lenny Bruce, and he'd talk about Lord Buckley, and he'd talk about art, and he'd talk about, and every once in a while in a class he would say, all right, everybody does the same, Del. All right, what's everybody reading? And, no matter what, people would raise their hand and Del would know that book, know the author, know other books by that author, and know other books that were similar to that author. And his whole thing was, no stuff. Stop reading books on theater. I don't know how many books there must have been books on theater back then, but start reading, like go to the Art Institute, go to the Lyric Opera, go to see shows, go to see movies that you wouldn't ever be cast in, go to see movies, just go. And he would talk about it. And then after a while, he goes, all right, we're going to do scenes that are Paisley. And like, I don't know what the hell that means, but let's go. So at that time, everybody, it was phenomenal because keep in mind, no one was doing this.
Right.
No one. There was no classes that were Dell classes. And then he turned a bunch of people on that turned a bunch of people on. And so in Grime and Punishment, Mick Napier was in that class. And that's where I met Mick. And then Mick and I decided that we wanted to take what we were doing and go out into the world with a bunch of other people. And that's where the Annoyance Theater came from, right from there. So that's where the Annoyance Theater came from. And that's where all that came. That came out of classes that Dell was in.
Was Susan Messing?
Susan Messing was there. Oh, absolutely. Susan credits me for being in the first improv scene that she ever saw at Improv Olympic with Richard Label and I, and she says, that's what I wanted to do. And, yeah, and it was pretty great. And then we did Splatter Theater at a space that we rented in the building where Improv Olympics were, and that was the first real production that the Annoyance ever did. Yeah, that was the first production the Annoyance ever did. Crazy, man.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. It's really crazy. And so when this guy Sam Wasson, W-A-S-S-O-N, wrote this book, and it is a great book. It's a great read. Improv Nation. And I'm not just saying that because I'm quoted on the back cover, but it's that book is a great history of improvisation that no one has done before. And it's laid out really, really well. And I just can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. I'll have to check it out. I have all of those books, like Art by Committee and Something Wonderful Right Away.
Yeah, those books are great. And certainly Something Wonderful Right Away is just great. This goes deeper than all that. What I love about Something Wonderful Right Away is its oral history and really getting to know all these people. And it's really cool because I look at that book and I go, I remember reading that book way back when, and now I look at that book and I go, oh, I know that person. That person's a friend of mine. I know that person. I know that person. I know that person. Yeah, so it's really
amazing.
It really is amazing. It's amazing. In our small little universe that there's this book, and Jeffrey Sweet, who wrote it, he's a friend of mine, and he was on my podcast. So I look at all that and I think, I don't know how I ended up. So what Sam Wasson did was he connected with me, the author of that book, connected with me and said, you were at a golden age of improvisation in Chicago. And I was like, oh, was I? And then I realized, oh yeah, it was golden age. It was golden age. It was an amazing time.
Yeah, just other improv podcasts that I'll listen to sometimes, and
who's he?
Stephen Pearlstein. So it's Improv Obsession.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And at the end, he'll say we're in the golden age of improv, referring to now because there's so many theaters.
Oh, he's talking about now.
Yeah.
This is back in the 80s.
Right. So that's that was the question that I was going to ask you. Whether you think back then with Dell and with
all those people,
the formation, whereas now. Just like there's 4 improv theaters in the entire world. Now there's 4 improv theaters in
this block.
In this block,
right? It's like the Starbucksization of improvisation. Yeah.
I guess the question was just, do you think it's there's more of a golden age back then or now?
I totally understand your question, and
I guess it depends how you define golden age.
Yeah, clearly, it's not like that's fact based. It's all truth based, but I feel like now is. People have figured out how to monetize it. And in the monetization of it all, it's become a very different beast. Because at that time, I don't know that Dell was looking for a career. I know that Sharna was looking for, who was, connected. And she opened up that theater, and she was the person that understood structure, understood improvisation, was an acolyte of Dell, and was his largest booster. And really, we have to give her a tremendous amount of credit, if not the most credit, for where it is that we are right now. And I've talked to her about that.
Yeah, I mean, but she wrote Truth and Comedy.
She wrote that.
Even though you think about it as maybe being a Dell.
Oh yeah.
It's like, no, Sharna wrote that entire.
Well, no. I think that Sharna did write it, but I also think that Howard Johnson also wrote it. And Howard Johnson was in Baron's Barracudas as well, so he was in that first improv troupe too. In addition to knowing all the Monty Python guys, like not just knowing them, but being friends with all those Monty Python guys. Like, what the fuck? Anyway, going back to, and I'm going to hold on to it because that question was asked, and I'm going to honor that. I would say that right now it is a golden time for people understanding the power of improvisation, because you now have applied improv, like that whole universe that's right there, people looking at improvisation in a very different way. At that time, it was the onus, the genesis, the starting of improvisation, of improv as we know it right now. I think that people took more chances. I'm being very careful because I don't know this to be true, but I'm going to say it anyway. You'll get the letters. I think people took more chances back then because it wasn't defined. And I remember certain things where Del said, all right, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to improvise a movie. And I'm like, improvise a movie? How do we improvise a movie? Keep in mind, no one improvised a movie.
Right.
And we're going to improvise a movie. Okay. All right, John Cassavetes. I'm like, I have no idea who John Cassavetes is at that time. Didn't know who he was, but I remember doing a scene where I was just paying attention to my partner, being connected to my partner, and afterwards Del went, that was great, Cassavetes. That was like Cassavetes. I'm like, okay, I have no idea who we're talking about. But at that time, Del did that. Del also did a thing where it was like, again, how his mind worked. I remember him doing 2 heralds on stage at the same time. And you go, why? Who knows why? If you're asking why, the why doesn't matter, the how doesn't matter, nothing matters other than we have this guy here who's facilitating us to do things that we've never done before, who's midwifing this thing in a way that we've never done it before. And I didn't really know his provenance. I didn't know who he was or where he was from. Yeah. It didn't matter to me. I wasn't looking for a guru. I wasn't looking for anybody. I was looking for this. I just came from agitprop theater, doing theater in prisons, like fucking crazy stuff, to this guy. And there's an intersection where the Venn diagram, the intersection right there is big. It's large. What I was taught with John Bergman and Geese Company, what I was taught by Del, essentially it all came down to this. Know as much as you know about as many things as you know. And surrender to the idea of the more you know that you don't know. And don't look at that as a daunting thing. And don't look at that as a challenge. Just look at that as, the more I know that I don't know, the more exciting stuff gets.
So then you went to Second City.
I went to Second City.
Performed with Carell and...
Yeah, but there's pieces missing here. So the missing pieces was this. My dad kept saying, when are you going to audition for Second City? I'm like, I'm not ready. And I'm a big guy on knowing when I'm ready. And everybody is a big guy on knowing when they're ready. So I wasn't ready to do that yet. And then one day I decided I'm ready to do that. And I auditioned for the training center at Second City. And I got into the training center at Second City. I was in the training center at Second City. Mick was in the training center at Second City ahead of me. This guy, Richard Label, was in the training center at Second City. Like, all these people were ahead of me. And I would go, and you can't do this anymore, but I would go and sit in the audience and watch my friends be in class. I wouldn't participate in it. I would audit it, because Martin DeMott was there, and I love Martin. He was a friend of all of ours, and he was a great teacher, really, really inspiring man. Michael Gellman, a really great teacher, really inspiring man. I would sit and watch them, and then I would have those teachers as teachers, and so I just dump myself into this thing whole hog. So I went to Second City, then I auditioned for the touring company, and then I got into the touring company. I was surprised that I got into the touring company, and a couple of my people that I grew up with, quotation marks with, Mick didn't get into the touring company. He auditioned twice and he never got in. But everybody has their path. So I ran and told this one teacher that I had, who I loved, Donnie DePaulo, great teacher, Second City alumni, really, really great man. I said, and he was always at this bar called the El Town Ale House, and I ran in like, I want to show you my report card. And I ran in and I said, Donnie, I got into the touring company. He's like, great. Here's the plan. Do your job. Don't gossip. Leave when you're done. Like, whoa, cool. And that's what I did. Never gossiped. Every day that I was there, if it ended that day, I was fine. And it ended on my terms. I left before I was bitter, because a lot of people don't, which I never understood. So then Gelman was one of my teachers there, and Gelman said one day while I was in the training center, he said, I direct a show called The Seed Show, and I want you to audition for The Seed Show. And what essentially is, they take 5 writers, like a playwright, a poet, a journalist, a sketch writer, an industrial writer, whatever the fuck that is. And he has us improvise for them ideas that they have. Then those guys go back, write a 1-act, and then come back with us, and then we just start creating that one act through improvisation. So I remember going to the audition at the Organic Theater in Chicago and sitting in the lobby and just talking to some guy, and then we go in, and the guy blew me away. And again, keep in mind, it's a nascent improvisation. You don't see that much. And so here's a guy that I don't even know. And I thought, if that's the quality of work that is being out there, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it was like, that was Steve Carell. It was Carell. I'm like, and at that time, and I think everybody has to know this, you're your name until what I mean by that is this. You're your name. Carell was Carell before he was Carell. You know what I mean? Like, I'm Dave Razowsky, and I've always been Dave Razowsky, and then one day, maybe everybody will know my name. But everybody that you're working with at that time, that was just this guy named Steve Carell. And there's just this guy named Stephen Colbert. And then there's a guy with, there's other examples, like a guy at Second City that always wanted to get into the touring company and never got into the touring company. He worked the back bar and all this sort of stuff, and he never made it. And then one day he broke up with his girlfriend and moved to California and wrote this screenplay called Swingers. And that's Jon Favreau. And when I knew him, he was this guy named Jon Favreau. And now he's Jon Favreau. A-list director, just amazing. Just amazing. And everybody is entitled to the journey that they're on, and their journey is very different than anybody else's journey.
So then, obviously we're skipping tons, but then you ended up artistic director for...
Oh my God, that's a lot of skipping stuff. Yeah. I was in the touring company, and then I got cast in the main stage, and we did shows at Second City Northwest, which is in a suburb, Arlington Heights, Hoffman Estates of Chicago. And then you get moved down to another resident company. I got moved down to another resident company, which is the ETC company in the back of the theater at Second City, and that was really great. About 250 seats. And then I got moved up to the resident company, the main stage company, which is 8 shows a week. Pretty amazing, 300 people. It's a pretty phenomenal job. Paid. It vested me in actors' equity, so now I get a pension.
That's great and rare.
It is. Oh, absolutely. But an important distinction here is to know that Second City is not an improv theater.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Second City is a theater. And there is improv, but it's scripted material created through improvisation. And the distinction is important for me because this is just an example. So when there are the Joseph Jefferson Awards, which is the equivalent of, it's Chicago's Tony Awards, the Joseph Jefferson Awards awards or nominates actors in Second City pieces to be up against somebody that has been in a Chekhov show at the Goodman Theater, or, somebody at the Steppenwolf Theater, or, those kind of productions, comedy, review. It's all seen as theater. And I think that's really important because when I'm the director of Second City, yes, my responsibility is to create a funny show. But first and foremost, my responsibility is to have the actors up there portray humans in as best a way as they can, because it's theater. And all improv is theater. All improv is acting. All improv is acting. And so when you're on stage doing something that you don't feel, then you're not human and you're not acting. You're just doing something that you feel obligated to do. And I'm going to notice it, and I'm not going to be interested in your dumbass show. I'm just not going to be interested in your stupid improv show. If you're going to go up there and your main thing is have somebody guess the phrase, chicken's what's having for breakfast time. It's like, okay, all right. Chicken's what having. That's 45 minutes of my life that I will never get back.
So in addition to your qualms with Yes and, also heard you say that you don't like when people just lay out the who, what, where, when.
The exposition.
Right, exposition and an initiation.
Yes.
Does that come from the same feeling that, no one really talks like that? No one says, you're my son, and today I'm going to teach you how to build a fire for the first time.
That's exactly it. I've gone, oh, really? Are you guys robots? Nobody talks like that. And then the moment, and I think that this is what it's all about. The moment that you say that, in my head, oh, that's what happens. I go in my head. That's exactly what happens. I go in my head, and what I go to is, you're my dad? Because I think that's what you said, right?
Yeah.
Son, you're my dad. What was the next thing that you said?
I'm going to teach you how to build a
Okay, wait. Let's pull that apart. I'm going to teach you. It's like, is there going to be a test? And how are we going to do this? How to build, oh my God, tools, whoever had a fire. Where are we that we can light a fire for the first time? How is it that I've never known how to build a fire prior to this moment? That's a lot of crap.
Yeah, to process.
It's a lot of stuff to process. That's so much to process. And what it does to me is anything that puts me into my brain, that puts me into the thinking, the figuring shit out mode, I have no desire to do that. Because what I'm thinking and what you're thinking are two different things. So what we have to do is find that place where the both of us can connect. So in your head, you have an idea of sun, build, fire, first time. Okay, that's what it looks like in your head. That's not what it looks like in my head. It looks, what you're thinking, what I'm thinking is different. But if I say, totally new scene. If I go, Jim, I'm not going. How do you want to respond? No plot. Jim, I'm not going.
But your mom's gonna be so...
that's plot. Go. Fuck your plot. Oh. Right, fuck your plot. Now, Jim, I'm not going.
This is just like last week.
Now, that's plot. Jim, I'm not going.
But you promised.
Lovely. We're closer. That's still in the past. Right? You promised. When you say you promised, now I gotta go in my head and say, when did I promise? Where were we when I promised? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Great. Say it to me.
Jim, I'm not going.
You're going.
I'm not going.
Right. Do you see what I'm saying? Which of those two scenes do you want to do?
The last one.
The last one. Why? Because we're just emotionally connecting in that moment. And when you said, I'm not going, that's exactly what I wanted. That's what David, the actor, wanted you to say. Because the moment that we start throwing shit in there, it's like, but last Thursday you talked it. Now watch what happens. And I'm very good at this. Last Tuesday you talked to Denise when we were over waiting for the refrigerator to come from the hardware store. And you were saying, you know what? We could have gotten more money from the hardware store if we just spent more time there. But no, you had to go to the brunch with your cousin. Like, what the fuck just happened to our scene? And the problem isn't the who, the what, and the where, the exposition. The problem is the actors don't know how to stop themselves at the moment that they are inspired. When I say inspired, what I mean is this, he said something that just got my heart, and attack that. And let go of your dumb plot, because that's all mental bullshit. I wish I felt passionate about this.
Yeah, you don't seem like you
No,
care.
like I don't care. But when I see people doing that, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel this way. When I see people getting into plot, I just shut down. I shut down because I want, it's like the first thing when you get a suggestion from the audience is you stand up on stage and you get a suggestion, and the first thing is like, can we have a location? A bar mitzvah party. I don't know. So, okay, you're at a bar mitzvah party, and what's the first thing the two of us do is we do this thing going, where's the bar mitzvah? Okay, we're at a bar mitzvah party. And it takes that initial moment to figure out what our role here is. Bar mitzvah party. What's a bar mitzvah? I know what a bar mitzvah is. And then we have to figure out if there's a bar mitzvah boy, and am I your dad? As opposed to just throwing this line out, not getting a suggestion. I'm basing everything upon the shape that your body is in right now. And the shape is, you look cocky. Your arms are at your sides, holding on to the table, holding on to the chair, and I'm like, you look cocky to me. That's the suggestion. I'm like, you're not everything that you think you are, Carl. Right? So at that moment, we don't have to figure dick out. Because at that moment that you got your hands here like this, aren't you going, why did David say that? Oh, because my arms are like this. Right? Accept that. And know that the one thing you can't do is what you did, which is release that. Take your arms away from that side. And now it's like, oh, fuck. Well, the scene isn't about that anymore. Because you don't think that you're enough. You think that you have to be something more than this. With your arms on the chair like this. And so, what I don't want people to do is have to figure anything out.
I was kind of going to ask you a question of openings or no openings, but I figure I can already guess the answer to that, because you're going even further and saying, no, it's not one word or a monologue. Your preference is nothing.
Well, it's not nothing. It's accepting what it is that we have right now and knowing that this is enough.
Right. Kind of like the TJ and Dave philosophy of like, there's already a story going on. When the lights come up, we're going to be in that story. And
keep in mind, Dave Pasquesi and I started the same time with Dell in that class that we talked about.
I always wonder if there's like a fear, because even though sometimes I feel like people don't necessarily need a word for inspiration, I don't know if there's like a fear of that the word somehow, like, allows you to convince the audience
What?
that it's improvised?
Oh, yeah, well, that's the main thing right there. Fuck the audience. Fuck them. I don't have to prove anything to them. Okay, what's the name of the show? The name of the show is the Improv Show at the Improv Theater with the Improv-teers improvising. And I have to prove to you that we're improvising? What more do you want? Why? Why do I have to prove that to you? If you think that we're not improvising, I'm doing a good job. I'm doing a really good job because you think this shit's written.
That is true. I guess if the goal is to do improv that is so impressive that people don't believe it's improv, then I don't know why you're imposing things onto it.
To prove it to you? I don't have to prove dick to you. I don't have to prove anything to you. Am I paying attention to you? Yeah. But here's the thing. Audiences are wrong 9 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10. And when you say, can I have a suggestion for a household object, you're going to get spatula each and every fucking time. But if I say to you, what don't you want rammed up your ass? Now we're onto something. But the majority of people that are getting suggestions for opening scenes aren't even taking the suggestions, and I'll give you an example. So let's take, can I have a household object? A spatula. Great, because it's always a fucking spatula. Where's the scene going to take place?
In a kitchen.
Goddamn right. Do you only find spatulas in the kitchen?
No.
No! No! You don't! If I say, can I have a location? And someone says, a doctor's office. And you go, okay. So who has to be in a doctor's office?
A doctor and a patient.
Nope.
Maybe a nurse.
Nope.
Oh yeah, not who has to be. I thought you picked.
No, nobody. You know, there is not that's not like 2 electricians, an astronaut. But we go, you know what we have to do? The audience has this expectation, but fuck those expectations. Right. And because for me, I'm not going to do the scene that you've seen before. I'm not going to do it. Because that's why they call it a scene, because you've already seen it. You know, we've done that. We've done that scene. I've done that scene. I've watched that scene. I don't want to see that scene again. I have no desire to see that scene. Nor do you. If you're paying $24, and I hope you're paying $24 to come see my show, and I hope that I get 3/4 of that, for me, you're paying money to see me do something unique. You're not paying me money to do something that you can see anywhere. And so I am going to give you the show. Now, how do we do that? We do this. By thinking differently. How do we think differently? We think emotionally because each of us is walking around with this great source of inspiration called our heart, our gut, and our creativity. And each of us has something different coming in. So if I'm going to do a scene that I've already seen, that's no fun. And here's another thing. Then I have to remember how the scene goes. And the moment that I have to remember how the scene goes, I'm in my fucking head. And then I'm just recreating something for you, and I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that at all. If I was interested in recreating something that you've already seen before, there's a tool that a lot of theaters use to make that happen, and it's called a script. And I'm not using your stupid script for a variety of reasons. But, you know, that's it.
One more quick question, I guess. Well, I'd really love to talk about the shape comes from viewpoints. So in your opinion, is that how you start a scene where... And I don't know if it's always shaped because there's obviously the multiple viewpoints.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you start a scene where whatever the other person's shape is,
yes,
that's the initiation?
Yes.
And so
that's the suggestion, yes.
Your first line is really the
in response to that
line.
My first line is in response to one of the 9 viewpoints. And and if you want to give a link to what the 9 viewpoints are, one of the 9 viewpoints. So the viewpoints is what shape are you in? That's how you're sitting. What gesture are you in? So it's shape, gesture. How far are we from each other? Distance, spatial relationship, tempo. What are you doing in what tempo? And all of that is inspiring to me. So I've got 9 different points to get to you. The main thing being, if I'm in response to something that you're already doing, we naturally start our scene in the middle. If I get a suggestion for a location, then we're starting a scene. If I am grabbing something from you that you're already doing, then you're already doing it. And we are clearly in the middle. So the viewpoints, and that's viewpoints with a capital V, there are 9 viewpoints. They were first realized by this woman named Mary Overley, and then they were codified by this woman named Anne Bogart and this woman named Tina Landau, by those 2 women. And when you look at those 9 viewpoints and you work on those 9 viewpoints, I mean, it is awesome. You don't have to think. You just have to respond. I don't want you to be eager to talk. I want you to be eager to respond. Because when you're eager to talk, then that's just something that I'm coming up with. But when I'm eager to respond, I cannot wait to find out what you want me to say. And that is where the service comes in. Because I am, as you mentioned earlier, I am in service to you. We are in service to each other. And anytime you bring something in that has nothing to do with what's going on, I'm no longer in service to you. Now I'm in service to me. And where does that leave you? Because this is about collaboration, connection, the realization that I am not alone in this world, because essentially all improvisation is an existential experience into what is it that you're feeling in this moment in relationship to somebody else.
All right. I think that's great. I think that's a great place to end.
I figured that.
You're a pro.
Thank you so much. Really great.
Hey everybody, it's me again, your host, Clayton Mashad. I said at the beginning of this episode that I would share some notes with you, and so instead of doing my usual outro, I figured I'd do a technical appendix of sorts, and so I'm going to share with you some of the notes from my workshop that I took with David Razowsky. Alright, so the main topic of this workshop was focusing on what inspires you as the improviser. Start by sharing some quotes, some notes, and then some exercises that you can use if you want to work on some of these techniques. The only thing that you know or own is how you feel in that moment. So feel, don't think. He goes on to say, cleverness is an ego-based way of looking at things. Another great quote related to that is, your brain is an asshole and a liar, but your heart is always true. So another great quote related to that is, if you personally experience a moment of change and ignore it, then you have to pretend to feel a feeling that you're no longer feeling. Rather, just surrender that original feeling and embrace the new feeling you're feeling. Another related quote, we don't know what the scene is about until it's over. Stop going somewhere and be here now. Another interesting thing, so a lot of the time we'll say, you always, to drive home a game, but he has this quote, when you add an always, we add a false history, which we may not need. I guess the lesson there is, only use always when you think it's totally necessary. He had some interesting notes on questions. So he's not a huge believer in the idea that you're not allowed to ask questions, even in an initiation. So what he says is, there are no questions, only statements. And the idea there is, don't answer questions, respond to tone. So there's a big difference between, what are you doing? And, what are you doing? Another cool quote he says is, there's no such thing as a figure of speech. So if your scene partner says something that in the real world would be figurative, like, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, then your response should be that you actually think that that person might eat a horse. Some other great quotes. So here's a great one about conflict. So improv comedy is not rooted in conflict. It's rooted in tension. There's some other random quotes. If you want to be interesting, be interested. I think Dave said that in our interview. Another cool thing he says is, be eager to respond, not eager to talk. I think he also said that in the interview. And he follows that up with, I can't wait to find out what I don't know about my character. And that fits into the idea of stop going somewhere, be here now. So there's also a cool quote that we kind of talk about in the podcast, kind of related to the TJ and Dave philosophy. Whatever we're watching was already going on before we started watching it. And that's how you should treat your improv scenes. Alright, so in this interview, we didn't really have time to touch on viewpoints, so I'll go through the viewpoints for you now. So there are 9 viewpoints. The first one is shape. That's the major one. He talks about how usually he takes the other player's shape as the suggestion instead of taking a word from the audience. And so that's really just all about body language. You read what the other person's body language is saying, and then you respond to that. The second viewpoint is gesture. Then we have tempo, which is just obviously the speed. So that's something that you can play with. You can even have contrast where there's a fast-tempoed player and a slow-tempoed player, and it says a lot about the characters. The fourth one is repetition. And so he says repetition is not redundancy, it's just hunkering down. The fifth viewpoint is spatial relationship, so that's distance, or the emotional content of distance. The sixth one is architecture, so that's your surroundings, so that could be anything. That could be the chairs that you're using, it could be the size of the stage, could be the lighting, could be some background noise if sirens go by. The seventh viewpoint is topography. The eighth one is duration, so how long things are going, how long someone is talking for, how long someone is doing object work. And the last one is the kinesthetic response. So when someone sneezes and you say, God bless you, when a siren goes off and you cover your ears, when someone says your name and you turn towards them, those are all kinesthetic responses. If you're interested in learning more about viewpoints, I'm sure you can Google viewpoints and improv. I know there are a lot of articles out there. Lastly, we're just going to talk about the exercises that we did in the class, so in case you want to work on some of these principles. The first exercise we did, it's just one person talking to Dave, or the coach, and so based on your shape, he gives you an opening line, and you just repeat that, you're heightening it, you're using this idea of creative adjacency, so you're just slowly building what you say. I'm so mad, I can't believe you do this, you've broken my heart, I don't think I'll ever be the same again, I think I'm going to kill myself, and at that point, you're changed, right? You've reached this totally different level, but all you're doing is repeating the same idea over and over, so it's playing on this idea of repetition, but you still end up with this emotional change, and the big takeaway there is don't go back. So once you say, you broke my heart, don't go back to, I'm so mad. Once you're going to kill yourself, don't go back to, I don't know what I'm going to do. Alright, so that's a pretty simple one. You can just do that with two people, and you don't even really need that other person to give you that first line, right? You could come up with it on your own. The second exercise that we did, it's two people were facing Dave, so two people could be facing the coach or a third player. Based on the shape those two players are in, he gives them an opening line to say. Both people are talking to that person, so they're sitting in two chairs and they're facing that third person. They're both talking to him. They go back and forth addressing that person. It's the same idea as in the first one. You're just repeating this line. You're heightening it, building on it, saying things that are kind of adjacent to it, like I said in the first example. And then when one player says something that stands out or is unusual or they're changed or something that's different, like I think I'm going to kill myself, the other person turns their chair 90 degrees towards them and calls out that thing in the same way that you'd kind of do with unusual thing in the game. And the other person stays facing the person that they're both talking to and waits until the other person says something that changes them, and then you turn towards them. And then you just start having this scene, and it's a super interesting thing because he's not teaching it in the sense of game. He's not teaching game at all, but it really reinforces that idea of you're waiting for this unusual thing. Once you recognize the unusual thing, you turn the chair and start calling that out, but they're not changed. They're just continuing to heighten and do this thing that they're doing. And then when the other person says something weird, then that person turns. And then by that point, you really do have a dynamic. It's a super interesting way. So I think if you were teaching game, even if you weren't teaching these specific methods that he's doing, I think even if you were just teaching game and trying to get people to recognize game and trying to get people to play the game, I think this is a great exercise. And so a lot of these exercises play with vagueness. So I've heard Krakowski say that pronouns are the enemy of improv. And obviously we all know that you're not supposed to talk about it. You're supposed to say what it is. But a lot of these exercises we purposely played with vagueness. And so in this third exercise, it's similar to exercise 1. But once you get to that period, once you get to that, I can't believe you did this. I'm so mad. You broke my heart. I'm going to kill myself. Once you get to that period, that end line where you're emotionally changed, then the class guesses where you wouldn't expect this to take place or be between. So it's just one person facing the coach, facing out. There doesn't even necessarily have to be a person there. They could just be talking to a ghost person. So using that same example, I can't believe you did this. I'm so mad. You broke my heart. I'm going to kill myself. Then they would guess where it's supposed to be. And so one of the things that he says is make a big deal out of little things and make a small deal out of big things. So the way that you would do that exercise is, I'm so mad. I'm going to kill myself. Then you would all try to guess what would be the funniest situation. And you might say, he's talking to the pizza delivery boy, right? I can't believe you did this. How could you be 15 minutes late with my pizza? All right, the fourth exercise that we did, similar. So it's two people talking about it. You never name it. So I can't believe you're wearing that to the party. What's wrong with this? It makes me feel comfortable. I like it. I really can't believe you wore that to the party. That's totally inappropriate. What do you mean? I like it. It makes me feel like myself. Yada, yada, yada. And then at some point, once the context is revealed, once you have that developed scene, then you reveal what this thing is. And it's the same idea of make a small thing out of a big thing or make a big thing out of a small deal. Right, so in that situation, I can't believe you're wearing that to the party. It's totally inappropriate. But what do you mean? It makes me feel good. It makes me feel like myself. Be like, yeah, but it's the school mascot outfit. You're not supposed to wear the school mascot outfit to a party, or whatever. Alright, and then the fifth exercise we did is just freeform. So just two people looking at each other, one person says something, the other person responds, and they really just repeat that. And so, there are classic rules. Don't ask questions, don't be strangers, say what the it is, say what the pronoun that you're talking about is. But I saw some great scenes that were literally between two strangers talking about something that we didn't know what they were talking about, and it was all questions. And so the scene was just, where did you go right now? And the person said, I'm not going to tell you. No, where did you go right now? I'm not going to tell you where I went. Where did you go right now? I'm not telling you. And it ended up turning into this great scene that developed into, it was an interrogation where the police was interrogating a suspect. And just by repeating this thing over again, the person said, I'm not going to tell you. Tell me where you went. And ended up, standing out of their chair, knocking the chair over. And it was great because it was a hilarious scene, but it was literally between two people that didn't know each other, someone asking a question. It was totally repetitious. There was literally nothing going on. It was just a person saying, tell me where you went. No, I'm not going to tell you. And they just kept building. If you don't tell me where you're going to go, I'm going to get mad. And it just kept heightening in that same way that we talked about, where you're just slowly building on everything, but it's still repeating, just slowly growing. And by the end, they turned into hilarious scenes. And it was really surprising because, like I said, you're literally breaking all the rules of improv. The initiation was a question. The person didn't answer it, didn't say anything, didn't say where they went. They're talking about some location, but they're, never addressing what it is. And it was still a hilarious scene. And so we did lots of scenes like that, where it'd be, well, that looks expensive. Well, sometimes I like to indulge. I mean, that looks really expensive. Yeah, but I think I deserve it. I work hard. That looks really expensive. Are you sure you can afford that? Yeah. Work hard, play hard. They just keep repeating those things, but slowly, adding more detail, but not adding any plot, not adding any backstory, not adding anything about who those two people are. And then in the end, it turns out to be something that's totally ridiculous. Obviously, so you're making a big deal. You're acting like something is really expensive. So you'd want to say, yeah, but everyone knows that movie popcorn is overpriced. Or, something that really, you're having this whole argument of that looks expensive. No, I like to splurge. I deserve it. Oh, I don't know. Are you sure you can afford that? And it just turns out to be something trivial. Movie popcorn isn't the best example, I guess. Could be something stupid. In the class, it was a plastic napkin ring. So it's great because a lot of the time, I think we've all ended up in that situation where you're talking about some it. Like, oh, here's your birthday present. Oh, it's really nice. Oh, I hope you like it. It took me a long time to pick out. Oh yeah, how did you know I wanted something like this? And obviously, a lot of the time you keep thinking in that scene like, oh, I'm purposely, well, so you might be purposely not saying it because you think that the other person knows what it is, right? And so you don't want to be rude. You shouldn't do that. If you don't think the other person knows what it is and it's important for the scene to move on, then you can call it out. But we really just played with this idea of not naming it. You build up stakes around it, so you either act like it's a really big thing or it's a really small thing, and then you do the foil, right, where it turns out to be the opposite. And it's hilarious. But I think you really need the other person to be on the same page and realize what's going on. So an example where you could do something where you're making a small deal out of something is, oh man, I can't believe we missed it. Yeah, there'll be another one. Yeah, but we always forget about things. We're always late. I don't know, I wish we were more punctual. Listen, there's gonna be another one soon. We don't really need to stress out about it. It's fine. We missed this one, we'll get the next one. Yeah, I know, I'm just upset that we missed it. Well, Mom's dead. I don't think she's gonna notice if we weren't at her funeral. Or, yeah, but I'm sure Mom's funeral was gonna be boring anyway. So you're acting like it's something trivial, like, oh, we missed the bus, but there's gonna be another one, and then you foil it, and you have it. turn out to be something super serious. However, if you notice there, I couldn't help myself from adding always and adding backstory. I said, we always miss things. And so that may or may not have been unnecessary backstory. And so what makes these scenes really successful is this idea that I think I've heard Ian Roberts refer to as mapping, right? So you start with, you have this context, right? So it's, maybe low stakes. And the example that I just did, it was, it sounded like they were missing a bus. That's the thing that made sense. The thing that made the least amount of sense is that they were just casually talking about missing their mom's funeral, right? And so that tilt happens, and the other person, the person who didn't reveal a foil, they don't all of a sudden switch and start acting as if, trying to justify why they're acting nonchalant about a big deal or why they're making a big deal out of a small thing. They continue to act like it was that thing that made sense. So say you were doing a scene and it was, dude, get your hands off of her. Dude, why are you freaking out? What's the big deal? I said don't touch her. What's wrong with you, man? That ain't cool. She's mine. Dude, calm down, man. Why are you freaking out? Dude, you're looking at her. I can see you're looking at her. Yeah, dude, what's the big deal? It's only a bicycle. Right, once that tilt, it seems like they're talking about something that is a big deal. One friend is trying to pick up the other friend's girlfriend or wife. And so that's the thing that makes sense. Right, the foil is some low stakes about someone touched or is looking at your bike. That doesn't really make any sense. So that person doesn't start justifying why they feel that way about their bike. They're not like, yeah, but I had to do my paper route. I had to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning to do that paper route for 6 months to afford that bike. I don't want anything to happen to it. Or, well, that was my grandfather's bike and he left it to me in his will. Once the foil happens, you don't start playing as if you're now aware of this new thing. You continue to play exactly the way you were playing before. So you would continue to act like it's a bike. Yeah, dude, get your hands off of her. She's mine. I don't know what makes you think that she'd be into that. I don't know what... You're gonna try to ride her? What type of perverted family are you from, you bunch of heathen sickos? And that's really the crux of how you do a good, straight absurd scene. That person's being absurd because they won't even let their friend look at their bike. And the way you do that is you're mapping it to a thing that makes sense for that behavior. So they're acting a certain way. Well, what makes sense for why they would act that way? The other person tilts it for a thing that doesn't make sense for comedic effect, and then that person continues to act like they're acting about the thing that does make sense. Alright, so I think that's pretty much it. I know I didn't go into super detail about the viewpoints, but it's something I still want to learn more about. So if you know about it, why don't you come on my podcast and we can talk about it? Alright, as always, thanks for listening, rate and review us, and I'll see you next episode.